hope you will find my presentation useful in learning how to tell difference between these different types of studies. And here's the contents for my talk today. Well, as we all have same professional background, I will skip the explanation of the concepts in the presentations that follow, and you can pause the screen to read it if you need to. The first one is descriptive study. As my mouse moves around, the small catalog for this module appears. The descriptive study has several types. The first one is cross-sectional study, and it's the kind of research we will be focusing on later. And case reports, case series analysis, case study, analysis of historical information, follow-up study, and ecological study. It has several characteristics too, like the main research tool is observation and the study participants are not in random. The exposure factors are not randomly allocated, and there's usually no control group at the start of the study, and the order in which exposure and outcome happen cannot be determined. It provides clues for subsequent analytical or experimental studies. It can be used to describe the pattern of distribution and development of a disease or health condition. It also obtains clues to the cause of a disease and formulates hypotheses about the cause. Then it turns to cross-sectional study. It's also known as prevalence study. It generally has no control group, the specific points in time or period. It restricts in determining causal association. Cause inferences can be made about exposures inherent to the study populations. It replaces or estimates past conditions with present exposure is conditional. And repeated at regular intervals can yield incidence information. It has two types. One is census, is surveying the entire population at a given point in time or period within a given paradigm. And the second one is sampling survey, a random sampling surveying a representative sample of the population at a specific point in time and within a specific range of people, and it using the sample statistic to estimate the range of the overall parameter. It can be used to capture the prevalence and distribution of disease in target population and provide clues to causative factors or disease. It identifies high-risk groups and evaluate the quality of disease surveillance, vaccination, effectiveness, and other information. Then is ecological study. It has two types as well, like ecological comparison study and ecological trend study. And this is the conclusion of cross-sectional study and ecological study. Well, cross-sectional study is a basic research method in epidemiology. It can quickly provide accurate information about prevalence of a specific disease in a certain group at a certain time. However, it cannot provide information about the incidence rate, which makes it difficult to determine the cause and effect relationship. An ecological study is a study of how people and their environment interact. It is simple, but it can lead to mistakes in our understanding of ecosystems. The second part is cohort study. It includes prospective study, follow-up study, and morbidity study. The principal diagram is on the left, and the characteristics of is that it belongs to the observational research tool. It's setting up a control group from cause to effect. It has a stronger ability to test causal link between exposure and outcome. The purpose of the study is to testing the etiological hypothesis, evaluating the effects of prevention, studying the natural history of disease, and post-marketing surveillance of new drugs. It has three types. The first one is prospective cohort study. The study is defined in present and study subjects are grouped according to their current exposure, and follow-up is required, where outcome will occur at some points in the future. The advantage of prospective cohort study is that the chronological order enhances confidence in etiological inferences, direct access to exposure and outcome information makes results plausible, and access to incidence rates. While longer follow-up observational time, greater investments of manpower, resources, and time affecting feasibility are the disadvantages too. The second type is retrospective cohort study. At the start of the study, both exposure and disease have already occurred, and the researcher doesn't need to expect disease or death as in a typical cohort study. The data are collected and analyzed in a short period of time, and the chronological order is due from cause to effect. It saves time and efforts and produces results quickly, while the data accumulation is under control of the researcher at the end of time, and it may not be consistent in content. And it requires sufficiently complete and reliable historical record or archival material on the exposure and outcome of the subject at some time in the past. It's bidirectional cohort study. Exposure and the resulting short-term effects have already occurred at the start of the study, while exposure-related long-term effects have not yet emerged. This module that combines a prospective and a historical cohort study, so it has the advantage of both types. It usually used when the conditions for historical cohort study are basically in place. But if the observation time from exposure doesn't meet the requirements of the study, like insufficient person time, unmet effect period, and a period of prospective observation is required, a bidirectional cohort study is used. This 7-year legacy of the Framingham Heart study is a typical cohort study. The third part is case control study. It belongs to the observational research and setting up a control group. It is retrospective from effect to cause, generally not able to summarize causality, except when a clear cause persists. It has multiple causes for one effect. Well, it's usually used for research on the causes or risk factors of disease, for studies of factors influencing health-related events, for studies of prognostic factors for disease and factors influencing clinical efficacy. It has 4 types: nested case control study, case cohort study, case study, and case crossover study. Here's a table summarizing the characteristics of the 3 observational studies mentioned above to help you better distinguish between them. The final one is experimental study. Here are some concepts. It belongs to prospective research and it can be applied of one or more human intervention treatments. The subject is usually randomly allocated to comparison groups, and it has parallel or comparable experimental and control groups. It has several applications like validation of etiological hypotheses, evaluating the efficacy of disease control and prognostic inferences, evaluation of new drug efficacy or adverse effects, and screening studies and evaluations. It has 4 types: clinical trials based on patients, field trials based on population, community trials based on community, and quasi experiments. So finally, this is a table summarizing the 4 studies covered today, and I've listed what I think are the most important differences. And it is obvious that the difference between observational and experimental research is whether or not there is a human intervention. And cross-sectional study, cohort study, case control study are all observational research, while cohort study and case control study is analytic. and cross-sectional study is descriptive. So that's the end of today's knowledge sharing. Thank you for listening.